what you're really saying is, in my opinion, the writer has done this in order to achieve this effect, or in order to make the audience feel this way, or in order to make a statement about things that they believe in. You can only really say that you believe that that is the case, but the examiners don't mind if you just simply say the writer shows he is angry about the empire by using these words or phrases,
By
and then you give
using.
examples of the words and phrases, and you analyze why they show the anger. You have to say, well, if you're suggesting that the writer is being angry, then you need to have evidence to back it up by saying when he or she uses this word and this word, that shows anger. And you have to explain why that shows anger. Just because he says this word or she says that word, you have to say, but that word, because it has connotations in the minds of the readers that would link it to things that they would find horrifying or upsetting, then he's obviously making a comment about the subject that he's talking about. You see, you're
Yes.
building up layers of explanation in that way. You're saying what you think the writer is trying to say, and then you're trying to say how is the writer saying that
Okay. Thank
by
you.
using words in certain ways for certain effects. Mm.
Can I use the word that author use, or I have to use mine?
No, you can talk about the writer, the author. You can use their last name if you want to. You can say Dickens does this and Dickens does that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go back to the text, and hopefully everybody's seeing it now. Yolanta, can you see that now?
No.
Oh
Yes.
my.
Okay, never mind.
Well,
Okay, just
you'll have to catch up with it
mm,
on the video. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on because it should be there.
all
It is
right.
the page 2 in the book, if you've got
Yes,
the
if
book.
you've got
Yeah,
the book,
if you have
Ah,
the book, yeah.
if
all
you got the
right.
book, it's
Yeah.
page. We're looking at page 2 at the moment. Yeah,
Okay, super. Yeah, thank
yeah.
you.
And thank you
Mm-hmm.
for reminding me. So last week we did look at Dylan Thomas's little holiday memory of August Bank Holiday, and we had a bit of fun with that. Now, one of the questions that people often ask is, how do you actually express yourself about this? Yes, we've read it, we've thought about the language that's being used, we've thought about what he's saying and how he's saying it, but how would you put it down as an answer to a question? What would an answer to a question actually look like? And the book is good at showing that. So if you look at the top of page 3, they've actually got an extract from a grade 5 student. Now, grade 5 would be suggestive of somebody who's going to get a standard pass in the exam. So grade 4, grade 5 are the old C grade. So this is not like the highest level kind of writing that you're going to see. We're going to look at a grade 9 in a bit, but this is just a grade 5. So this is the sort of thing that everybody should be aspiring to and above in this class. Okay. The writer engages the reader by describing the scene well. He talks about the sea and sand using words that sound like you are actually there. For instance, there is the slap of sea, which is alliteration and captures the sound of the water. He even writes about the people you would see on the beach in groups, a sunburn of girls and a lark of boys. This tells us what they are like. The girls are red and the boys are fooling around. Lark makes it sound good fun. So at a reasonably standard level, this is explaining some of the way that Dylan Thomas is engaging his readers through his writing. So the question was, how does he engage his readers through his writing? So using alliteration, making us feel like we're actually there, and using a bit of humor at the end, making it sound fun. That's basically what the the grade 5 student is saying. Look at the way that they've used quotes. So, for instance, there is the quotes slap of sea, close quotes. So that bit, slap of sea there, is actually from the text, and therefore it's enclosed in quotes. You can put these single ones, or you can put the double ones, it doesn't matter, as long as they are enclosing the language which is in the text. Because you're not using those words as words. You're presenting them as an object that you're talking about. And you do that by putting them in quotes. They identify them using a specialism word or alliteration, sure, slapsy, and that apparently captures the sound of the water. He could be, I say he or she could be, a bit more full in terms of their explanation. How does the alliteration capture the sound of the water? What does it mean by capture? Maybe suggests would be a better word, or mimics or imitates the sound of the water. But those S sounds actually suggest the sound of the water slapping on the shore. You need to put in a little bit more work to get the higher marks, in order to get a more a fuller picture of what's actually going on. He does talk about the sunburn of girl and the lark of boys. This tells us what they are like. The girls are red, the boys are fooling around. I mean, that's literally true, but at quite a low level. Again,
Why is
go on, sorry, say.
why is he using semicolon? Not is not semicolon. Is it colon?
A semicolon there in groups, semicolon. Presumably because the first half of the sentence is making a general point. He writes about the people you'd see on the beach in groups, and then this is a particular example of what he's just been talking about. So it's kind of like a presentation of the quote. But remember, you don't get marks on this question, on this part of the paper, for your spelling, your punctuation and grammar. You could just do a line. You don't even need to have any punctuation there. As long as it's clear that this quote goes with that comment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But his explanation of the comment is a little bit thin. This tells us what they are like. Actually, it tells you a lot more than that. It shows a division between the way girls are and the way boys are. And the girls are taking themselves seriously, thinking about their looks, thinking about their golden brown skin. The boys are just, larking about and being daft. But it shows that the girls have to, even when they're relaxing on the beach and on holiday, they're still thinking of their position as being, we want to look beautiful, we need to look at our best. It's all about the way that girls were being made to feel like they were objects of beauty. Even 80 years ago, before the big glossy color magazines came along to body shame everybody. It was still very much an idea that, wow, I'm going to spend my day burning myself under the sun to make myself look beautiful. The boys don't need to worry about that. They just lark about like they're still children. They haven't got that responsibility to make themselves look good for the girls, have they? So that actually there's a lot going on there that you could talk about, but would require a little bit more insight. He says that right at the end, lark makes it sound good fun. Why does it make it sound good fun? You'd have to explain what the word lark means. He's presuming that the examiner understands he knows that, but what is it about the word lark that means good fun? It's just the simple thing of saying the word lark, which suggests japes and games and, playing the fool, makes it sound good fun. That would be an explanation. Now, how might that be developed to make it a higher level response? Instead of saying this first sentence, for example, says nothing, means nothing at all. The writer engages the reader by describing the scene well. You don't need these introductory sentences. They're just a waste of time. Yeah, go straight into talking about the language. So you can see where they have enhanced it here with an introductory sentence that makes the clear point at the beginning. The writer uses a number of devices to engage readers. He uses alliteration, metaphor, and onomatopoeia to make readers imagine that they are on the beach with him. By referring to the sea as a slap, he uses a metaphor and onomatopoeia to suggest the sharp sound and rough movement of the sea. Similarly, when he refers to the tickle of sand, he both uses a metaphor to describe the grainy texture of the sand and appeals to the reader's sense of touch. It suggests the tingly texture of the grains of sand on our feet, the funny sensation of being tickled, and the sense of enjoyment one has at the seaside. And that last bit's particularly important because this statement that he uses a metaphor to describe the grainy texture of the sand, well, okay, but what does it mean? What is he actually doing with that? How does that appeal to our sense of touch? But then he explains it. It suggests the tingly texture of the grains of sand. And you can see that this really is the student's own words. It's not being said in big technical terms. The tingly texture of the grains of sand on our feet, the funny sensation of being tickled, the sense of enjoyment. And that really is touching base with Dylan Thomas's feeling about the beach. So they say that this second piece of writing is clearly more developed, and this is heading towards the top of the mark scale, towards grade 9. So in these two pieces of writing, you can see the difference between a good pass and a very high pass. It's simply the level of detail and the level of understanding that's on display. The real shame, I think, is that we often get people who are very, very understanding about the way that the language works, but they can't say it. They can't get it down on paper effectively.
Can I just ask something?
Yes.
I know this isn't fully formal language, but the difference between them two, that the second one is actually more formal in a way.
It is, yeah.
If that makes difference, because he's still using like quite common words, but you know, you can tell the difference straight away. The first one is as if you just talk to your friend and describe it. Yes. In that way, where the second one is more formal. Is that what they kind of expect?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. I mean, you put your finger on it really well, and it's a very good question, but there's a certain amount of pain behind that, around that answer. It shouldn't matter, is what I'm going to say. You should be able, in your own words, to produce a very sophisticated answer. It shouldn't be about using all this sort of, posh sounding phrases and formal tics, as long as you actually do a really good job of analysis. The examiners say not. Examiners say that that's not what they're looking for. Just because it's written as if it was some really formal essay doesn't necessarily mean the content is any good at all. And in fact, people could actually bullet point the key bits of the answer if they want to. They could just and it shouldn't matter, and the examiners should mark it on the basis of the content, not the way it's written. You're not supposed to be marked for the style of your answer. However, I think using words effectively, and using words efficiently to say what you mean is important, rather than waffling, and sort of going around subjects rather than actually hitting them on the nose. But there is this feeling, and I think the book reflects this feeling, that actually if you wrote it more like you were doing a 1970s literature essay, you're probably going to get more marks. It depends on who's marking it, and I have no evidence to suggest that it is true, but there is that feeling that if you write well, in a sort of a high sounding style, you should get more marks. But all the mark schemes show it's about the content. It's about the points you're making.
Bit of a grey area, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a grey area. It shouldn't be, but I think it still is to an extent. But I think the thing to focus on is making sure that your answers are clear. It's clear what you're saying and why you're saying it, and that you've got the right quotes nicely described and explained. And it's the content that should matter.
And
Okay.
Graham,
Thank
just on
you.
that point, are we expanding? Is it more opinion about how it makes you feel as a reader? Is it your opinion? So, for example, in this one, at the end, he says a funny sensation of being tickled and the sense of enjoyment one has at the seaside.
Yes.
So he's saying that when you go to seaside, you have enjoyment. But that might not be everyone's experience.
Well, I suppose, remember, he's relating it back. Go on.
Oh, right. I see what you mean. Yeah.
He's relating it back to the text.
Of course.
And what he's trying to pick up on is, why has Dylan Thomas talked about the tickle of sand and the slap of sea?
Yeah.
What he hasn't seen is, of course, the old-fashioned phrase, a little bit of slap and tickle. And having slap and tickle in the same sentence is obviously on purpose. The idea that the sea is having a bit of fun with you. And it clearly is meant to be a kind of a joyful, silly image, like the sand is tickling your feet. And so that's what the student is trying to express in that. But it is always your opinion, though.
Brilliant.
We can't get away from the fact that it's your opinion, but it's an informed opinion that you base on the quote, and then they can't say you're wrong, can they?
No. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Good. So if we slip down a little bit, there are a few phrases there. I mean, that the book does give you these sort of like little potted explanations of what the terms are. But we're going to look now at another piece of writing, a very different piece of writing from a bit earlier, from the 1930s. This is from Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So let's just look at the feelings behind this piece of writing. How does it make you feel?
That's the page 4, isn't it? Just
yes, sorry, it's page 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
In blue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The enormous room on the ground floor.
Oh, now I can see it.
You can see it. It's appeared.
Yeah.
That is amazing. The enormous room on the ground floor faced towards the north. Cold for all the summer beyond the panes, for all the tropical heat of the room itself, a harsh, thin light glared through the windows, hungrily seeking some draped lay figure, some pallid shape of academic gooseflesh, but finding only the glass and nickel and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. Winteriness responded to winteriness. The overalls of the workers were white, their hands gloved with a pale corpse-colored rubber. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost.
I'm going to be honest with you. This is actually a text that I can actually understand what I'm reading.
Yeah.
The previous year I had so many words that I was struggling with because I just couldn't. I had to translate them first, and it was so hard.
Right.
And this one is more,
More straightforward.
more straightforward. Yeah, I
Okay.
suppose.
Tell you what, I want to get this book.
Uneasy feeling.
Oh, this one is very good.
Have
One
to
of
get
the
it.
greats. Yeah. Now, how do you think you're meant to feel reading it?
Feels very cold.
The wintry.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Wintry. How cold
Yeah,
that is.
yeah.
You know, looks like cold.
Yes. And, you know, I mean, they've put some ice around it in the pictures, but just the words that you're on there, you
can
know,
almost smell the chlorine
Descri-
from what they
More
writing.
describe the
Yes.
room.
the room
the
itself as
description.
well, the bleakly shining porcelain. So even though the work surfaces and the sinks and everything are shining, and shiny would normally be a bright image. He puts the word bleakly in front of it to make it a little bit like an oxymoron. Bleakly shining. So it's shining, but it's shining in a really bleak way. So he dulls it down. You know, it's almost like saying it's dull and shiny, and those things don't seem to go together, do they?
No.
Then when he talks about the people there, the workers, the overalls of the workers were white, their hands gloved with a pale corpse-colored rubber.
Ooh.
The light
Bringing
was
to death.
yes, relating it to death. Yeah. And indeed, you know what that means. It's those gloves that doctors and wear on television when they're doing the autopsies, and you know, and they look like they're wearing a sort of a second skin, but it's oddly, yeah. And then actually describing the light itself, the light that's coming through the windows, as and a really strange way to describe light. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost of light, a ghost of light.
I mean, no warmth in that light. Normally, in the sun got a lot of warmth.
And you would expect the light from the sun to be bringing warmth into the room. And even though it describes the inside of the room as being tropical, the tropical heat of the room itself. But it feels so cold because it's emotionally cold.
Even it's summer, all the summer.
Yeah. And you've got when he talks about some pallid shape of academic gooseflesh, what's he talking about?
Seems like scientists to me. Seems like they're talking about the scientists and the people working in the laboratory.
It's a person.
They're pale. It's cold.
It's one of the scientists who works there.
They're cold, so obviously it's like goose pimples and goose bumps.
Yes,
it's cold.
It's when you get cold, you get those little bumps, so they call them goose bumps, goose flesh. Yes, and pallid, which again means white, drained of blood, literally to do with death. To have a pall over you, so they're white. They never get any sun on them. So what sort of horror would go on in a laboratory like this? You know. Now this comes from Brave New World, which is, as it says at the top, a novel set in a dystopian future.
Yep, I'm getting the book. Get the book.
And the dystopian is the opposite to utopia. Utopia is a place that's meant to be perfect and wonderful, and a dystopia is as bad as it possibly could
disarray. The word disarray,
Yeah. And so
dismal.
He Huxley uses a lot of words which suggest coldness. Even words like porcelain, glass, nickel. These things are cold to the touch unless they've been warmed up. Gooseflesh is what you experience when you are cold or when you are scared. And there are those sorts of images going on here. But towards the end, obviously, the connection with death. The idea that the workers were white, what they're wearing is white. The gloves are corpse-colored. The light was frozen. Even the light was dead. Even the light was a ghost. So it's suggesting death. And yet, what goes on in this room? Spoiler alert. This is where babies are brought to maturity. Not just artificial insemination. They're actually matured outside of the human body in sort of super incubators, and and they're exposed deliberately to different stimuli in order to make them different types of people. So some will be rattled, some will be given different types of chambers, some will be moved around every so often, even played music to, depending on whether they're going to be alphas or betas or gammas. And if they're going to be gammas, they're going to be the workers. If they're going to be betas, they're going to be the servants and the middle managers. And if they're going to be alphas, they will have a life of pleasure and luxury.
Sounds so interesting, honestly. Obviously, you can just tell by the way it's writing. I'm even interested. But I want to read this.
Good for you. It's a lovely book. Along with 1984, it's probably
that one too.
the two great dystopian novels of the 20th century. And Huxley was there, a good 16, 17 years before. I've forgotten his name. Yes, George Orwell.
Maybe mention in our analysis that
yes.
because it was written in 1931, that maybe the author is mentioning the death because of his experience during the First War, the death and the corpse and things like this.
Well, again, do you specifically have that information? You would want to maybe general about Aldous Huxley. You might want to general. If you were lucky enough to know anything about the author, you could say, obviously, this is a world still haunted by the First World War. But by 1931, still very, very much looking towards a new war.
Yes, because
the situation in Central Europe was definitely not very hopeful in 1931.
I don't think so, in my opinion, because First War between 1914 to 1918 finished, and 1918 to 1931, it's big gap between these, in my opinion. I don't think that's about.
Yeah, and it's not intrinsic to the piece of writing itself. There is something that's there in the writing itself. This is a laboratory. This is a world of science, and yet.
I think about autopsy or something like that. That's about, or something about to do with autopsy, because it talk about dead people, about white doctor that wearing gloves, everything, that sense of this and that's shiny laboratory that will be cleanest and everything. I think that's have to be clean and to be bright and to be for
and
the
yet,
doctor, they can see what they are doing.
It's bright, but it's also desperately cold, like you said, linked to death. The idea that there's something really quite sinister about this laboratory, and the idea that science, in the great white future that people were looking towards, which was the world of science, was going to give them great things, continual progress, a freedom from all our ills, a freedom from all our woes. Remember, this is before the invention of the atomic bomb. This is before the ideas of things like AI taking over the world, but it is in a tradition of suggesting that maybe we lose touch with humanity. Maybe we lose what makes us human when we give ourselves up to this sort of image of what the future can be.
Could we suggest is some sort of juxtaposition it is, because that's is live up the new human but dead up all the looks.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of nice language to play with here. Harsh, thin light. It's hungrily seeking some draped lay figure. So the light itself is being described as if it's almost like a hungry animal or a monster that's invading the laboratory looking for something to eat, hungrily seeking some draped lay figure, some pallid shape of academic gooseflesh. Lay in this context would suggest almost somebody who's connected to the church.
Right.
Somebody who is a scientist, or perhaps somebody who worships science. The idea that science is has replaced religion, and that the figures that work for this great, in inverted commas, church of science are the laity, you know. But the lay, the academic, and yet we have this lovely sentence: wintriness responds to wintriness. Wintriness. You don't often get that word, and then you get it twice in the same sentence. Yeah, you know, basically just everything to do with winter.
Yes.
So it's like a summation of winter. Everything about winter condensed into one word. Responded to wintriness. So the wintriness of the thin light responds to the wintriness of the inside of the laboratory. They're linked by their lack of color and their lack of warmth. Let's see what a grade 7 response looked like to this. So grade 7, yeah. So grade 7, we're now on page 5. So grade 7 would be the old-fashioned B. So it's a good, solid grade, grade 7. Very nice. Much higher than grade 5, getting on towards grade 9. Aldous Huxley creates an image of coldness, hostility, and inhumanity by repeating words associated with the cold, with white, and with death. So that is his thesis. That's his idea. That's the student's idea. Now he has to prove that. For example, he refers to the words cold, wintriness, goose flesh, and frozen. These immediately suggest to readers that the laboratory, which is symbolically facing cold north, is a hostile and cold environment. Its sanitary coldness is made more apparent because Huxley writes of the scientific machines and cold surfaces found within. So, you know, there's some nice ideas being fostered by this student in response. He'll need to go on to explain more why these words mean what he's saying they mean. You know, what is it about these words that connects in the way that he's suggested? But yeah, to do the full analysis. But as a way of bringing us into the idea, you know, about what the effect on the reader might be of this particular text, that's very well done there. So moving away from that and going back to something else, I'd just like to introduce you to one last piece of text, which I'm not going to look at in too much detail, but you can have it for homework. So there's a piece of writing. Are you all seeing a piece of writing called Prison Privileges?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
No.
No, Joanna, you can't see it?
Oh, no.
I can't. No.
Okay, so we got a thing called Prison Privileges Revamp. I will send it to you by email, okay? And now this is bang up to date. This is, well, bang up to date. It's from 2016, okay? So it's, but it is 21st century. It's a piece of non-fiction. It's a news article from the BBC News website. And it's about prisoners, prison conditions. Male prisoners in England and Wales must work harder for privileges such as TVs in cells, the government has said. Inmates will be made to wear a uniform during their first 2 weeks in jail, and their access to private cash to call home will be restricted. Satellite and cable television channels currently available in some private prisons will be banned altogether. The Prison Reform Trust said getting rid of tellies was not going to cut reconviction rates. But Justice Secretary Chris Grayling said, I want the arrival in prison for the first time to be an experience that is not one they'd want to repeat. That means an environment where they arrive, where standards are pretty basic, and then they start to gain extras by contributing. And if they won't do it, then they can't expect to start gaining those privileges. There are currently 3 levels of privileges available to prisoners: basic, standard, and enhanced. Currently, all inmates must be placed initially on the middle tier when they enter prison. This allows them to wear their own clothes, have a television in their cell, and gives them more family visits, access to private cash, and potential to earn more from prison jobs than those who are moved to the basic level for poor behavior. However, from November, all prisoners will spend their first 2 weeks on a new entry level, which more closely resembles the basic standard currently in place. Their behavior will be reviewed after 2 weeks, and they will either stay at the basic level or move up to the standard level. Max Chambers from the right-leaning Policy Exchange think tank said the moves were exactly what the taxpayers would expect from our prison system and would improve behavior in jails. Prison Reform Trust Director Juliet Lyons said it was perfectly reasonable to remove subscription TV channels, but there was no evidence to suggest that a so-called tough approach would improve rehabilitation. But to be more effective, you have to focus on employment and skills training, on making sure people have safe housing to go to, and that they have good contact with their family. So we have an extract from a BBC News report, and that is possibly one of the types of text you might get in your paper 2. It is, you know, a story from a news source, and that could be just one type of text that you might see. It's about the right length as well. That's about the right length for just one of them. And remember, you have 2 in your paper 2, one from the 20th or the 21st century and one from the 19th century. Now, the 19th century one will be a piece of literary non-fiction, like the Dickens one, although obviously longer. Written not just to be given you information, but also for pleasure, to be read for pleasure. Whereas this is not written for pleasure, is it? It's not written to be read for pleasure. It's written to give you information. And it's written to give you different points of view on a particularly important subject. So how do you feel about this kind of writing?
It's easier to understand.
Yes. Very boring.
So on the one hand, it's easier to understand, but on the other,
to the
it's a bit
one,
boring.
very boring.
Yeah.
It's informative.
It's interesting.
It's informative
It's
to give you information.
Yeah, it's got information.
Yes.
In it.
Facts.
It's got information which is interesting.
Yeah. It's more facts than.
Yes, and it is very obviously non-fiction. It's pure fact, isn't it? Although there are opinions in here as well, different opinions from different points of political point of view. And I don't think I've seen one quite as dry as this on the actual exam. This is pretty dry, but it's not but it's possible you would get a news story. Most of the ones that come from newspapers tend to be opinion articles, which are a little bit more entertaining, and they're written to be entertaining, whereas this one is written to be more factual. However, I want to illustrate a type of question that you can get at the beginning of the exam paper, a question 1, and of course you got one of these on your assessment. Some of you have only just done the assessments, and some of you did them a long time ago, but the question 1, which asks you to list 4 things. So this one asks you just to look at lines 1 to 8 and list 4 things about male prisoners from the first part of the source. So you've just got those first four. The bit I have highlighted there in grey is just from there. It just wants you to find 4 facts about prisoners from that little bit, and just to list them, not in big long sentences, just to list them, so that you can get 4 easy marks. That's your so your first question on both papers is very to the point. You're either finding 4 things, or you're having to say what are the true statements. So I'll send you that home for homework. But if you look through it further, it also gives us a bit of an idea about how to use quotes. So you have these quotes in quote marks throughout. So the actual words are the words of the person writing the article, but every so often dropping in a quote from the interview, which presumably is being said by the interviewee. The writer is using ideas that come from different points in the political spectrum. So you have the Prison Reform Trust, who presumably are more interested in making televisions. They're more interested in making prisons civilized places, which are working to rehabilitate the prisoners and help them go out into the world as better people, rather than punishment and making prisons horrible places to because we want to have our revenge on the prisoners. Now, the person who wants to have the revenge on the prisoners is Max Chambers, from Policy Exchange. And you see that they have maybe revealed their bias a little bit, the writer of this article, by saying that Max Chambers from the right-leaning Policy Exchange think tank. So just to remind us that this person's point of view is coming from a political spectrum, which is to the right. It's exactly what taxpayers would expect from our prison system. That is punishing these people. There, he's put up against Juliet Lyon, but it doesn't say from the left-leaning Reform Trust. So maybe identifying the politics of one but not the other is a little bit biased. You might say. You might analyze that for saying, oh, what's going on there. You have an actual politician, Chris Grayling, who was the Justice Secretary back then, and giving his.
He did transport. He did transport as well.
He did as well. Yes, wasn't he the one about?
Let's not remember him for transport.
The old cross-channel ferries guy, isn't he? That's right. He's gone forever now, I think.
Yes. Did he sail off on the ferry?
Oh boy. Yeah. But see how they also. Who do you think this is written to be read by? Who's the audience?
The future voters.
Certainly, there is an element of that. It is to keep the electorate informed of what's going on. Definitely.
I think it's for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And what makes you think that? Why isn't this written for educated university graduate types?
The way he's writing, the words is using is not, very, very formal.
It's not, is it? It's talking about an important news story, but the level of formality is quite low.
Yes, not.
Yeah, even in this, the Prison Reform Trust said getting rid of tellies was not going to cut reconviction rates. And so using this phrase, getting rid of tellies, that's very informal. It's a very informal quote there. If you look at here in this one, this allows them to wear their own clothes, have a TV in their cell, and gives them more family visits. It's very straightforward. It's really it's very easy to understand at all levels. Yeah.
For all the people's,
Yeah. So anybody can tune in, to it. I mean, obviously there are people who struggle to read this, but most people in the country would be able to read this. It's not exclusionary in the way I think you will find some of the text that we look at, where there has been this is being written maybe for a higher educational bracket. You certainly do find that where they ramp up the sort of vocabulary. I've forgotten the word. It's getting late. Yeah. So I'll send you this by email, and I'd like you to do that question 1 for me. And I'll also think of something else for you to do. So so that there's a little bit of homework for you to do. But the main thing I'm going to do for before I see you next week is I will send out your password and logins for the website, so you can get logged in and you can find where the videos are and all the rest of it. There'll be a whole load of stuff there from previous years. So those of you who've been on before, you'll still be able to see what you used to be able to see. But I'm going to make an area just for us, you know, for the 2024 November resit class. But you can look at anything that's on there. And you know, there's loads and loads of materials and stuff on there. But if you want to see this video, for example, it will be in our little section.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll make sure that's there for next time. Are there any questions?
Or even easily we go into your channel, we would see that easy, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to know anything? Or?
I want to ask you please one question. We can use in exam dictionary.
No.
For reading.
Not in the exam. No, you could in functional skills, but you can't in GCSE. GCSE, no dictionaries. Yeah, unfortunately on both papers there's part of the paper where spelling and punctuation and grammar are marked, so we don't
use words so you know how to spell them, I suppose.
Whereas on the first part, on section A, spelling and punctuation and grammar don't matter, so you can make loads of spelling mistakes and you won't lose any marks.
Reading paper A, reading.
Yeah, but the section A on both papers. So section A on both papers is reading, and then section B is your writing. They only mark the spelling, punctuation, and grammar on section B.
Yes. Okay.
What if it uses words that is not used in? What if does it use words? Do they in the exam papers? Would there be words then, for example, that's not used in everyday language?
Yes.
That we wouldn't know. So how would we be able to comment?
Yeah.
Would we make a guess? Right. Okay.
Right. That's an interesting question. Yes. Now, certainly when they're doing the 19th century text or even a 20th century one that goes back, it's likely that there will be specialist words, you know, that have just gone out of fashion, and they wouldn't expect anybody of you know, a 16-year-old in 2024 to know it. Sometimes they do list a few of them with explanations, but only ever 2 or 3, and they're never the one you want, you know. But so there definitely will be words you won't know. Now you can either avoid those words completely and not take them on, or you can do what you've just suggested, sort of guess them out from the way it sounds. You can even say, you know, I'm not 100% sure what this word means. However, it makes me feel this way because of the way it sounds, or you know, you can be creative with it. You know, they don't necessarily expect you to know all those words because they're giving you a 200-year-old piece of writing to look at. They can't expect you to know all of the words.
Sometimes it's possible to work it out from the whole sentence, isn't it? What the words mean as
Absolutely.
It's like Shakespeare, isn't it? It's like Shakespeare, because it's like sometimes you don't know exactly what the words are, but you can understand through context.
You go along with the flow of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Good point.
And sometimes you read a word and it has an effect on you, even though you don't know what it means. You know, because it just makes you feel a certain way, and you can be honest with the examiner because it's not like you're showing your ignorance. They wouldn't expect you to know it. If they wanted you to know it, they would have put it in the glossary.
Right.
I've got a question as well. Do you have any suggestions for any text or anything that we could read and etc. to get a little bit more familiar with, you know, the language in the meantime and stuff? I know you've mentioned that there will be some things to read on the Covlearn.
Yes.
Is there anything else, anything that you could suggest?
I mean, really, the two main things that I suggest. Now, apart from, say, specialist books, there are some, you know, reasonably good specialist books, things that you know, say AQA English language on them, which are sort of look at the you know, the basics of language in the exams. To get yourself familiar with the texts, on the other hand, the two things would be opinion articles or comment articles from good newspapers. I mean, well, that's me showing off my snobbery. From broadsheet newspapers. That is, from things like the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Times. You know.
In terms of books, like
now the Guardian website is free, so you can actually get into their comments and opinion articles for free. The comment articles from the Guardian appear every other year on the exam. It's really weird. Okay. Possibly because they're free, and possibly because most teachers read the Guardian. I don't know.
And the other, in terms of any books that we could
writing over there is really...
The other one is like I said before, short stories from the early 20th century, late 19th century. I mean, short stories so that you don't get bogged down in them. But if you want to read a Victorian novel, that's great, but it might take you a few months. But it's, you know, it's the but just getting used to that dialogue, to that way of phrasing, and the way of setting out the words, the long paragraphs, the long sentences, the odd words that you will pick up. And if you do pick up words you don't know, you know, look them up, use them in context, use them with your friends and family to amaze them, you know, and then actually increase your vocabulary as well. That's who you.
You know what? Because reading some of these 19th century texts, for me, it feels like I'm not even reading English.
I understand that. Yeah, and I think a lot of English people, you know, whose first language is English, often feel the same. You know, you imagine 16-year-olds getting dumped on some, you know, 1812 piece of writing. They're often very lost, especially since it could be, you know, a record of a sea ship crash or something, or a report into a coal mining disaster. It's not exactly the most gripping read. So yeah, and it was put in to make the exam hard.
I suggest, you know, I start in YouTube. I write Jane Austen, Emma. That's I start in YouTube the story Emma. I found it's easy. I just read it on YouTube, and it's very language. I don't know if that's actually the story in book or just, but I found
I'm sure it is.
And it's good. I started 3 days ago. Just try it on YouTube.
YouTube, or there's another one called Ex Libris. Ex Libris. So it's EXLIBRIS, and that's it's people who are volunteers actually just read books and stories, and there are loads and loads of out of copyright stories. So they tend to be old, so they tend to be quite old, these stories. And you know, if you can actually get the text in front of you at the same time as listening to somebody read it, I think that really helps. Audiobooks are a great thing as well.
It's very easy language, and you can hear and read in same time.
I just would like to tell there is app BorrowBox. You can read and listen books. Yeah.
So that's BorrowBox.
BorrowBox, yeah.
Library.
Yes, it's through library.
Yes.
You need to be
if you have a library membership, you can log on.
Yeah.
It's free.
Oh, okay.
It's
That's
very
good
good.
idea.
I just was looking through, and there was audiobooks of like Jane Austen and all sorts.
I understand, like, it's not going to be possible to read all of those books, you know, but
No.
to at least know which, at least, you know, short stories to read or etc.
Yeah.
Could kind of point me in that
Good
direction
idea.
and get
Yeah,
familiar.
I think the list which is on the website when you go onto it will be a good start.
All right.
Sorry,
yeah.
can you repeat the website you mentioned? EX something? Because
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's called Ex Libris. It's a bit like Audible, but it's all free, because there are very old books which are out of date, which not out of date, which are out of copyright. So I've put it in chat now. It really means out of the library, doesn't it? Ex Libris.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Latin, isn't it?
Yeah, and Charles Dickens' short stories are great. You know, just as a place to start. But you know, don't sort of look down on things like TV shows and films. They do give you a really good idea of the era. They sort of bring to life the 19th century and the early 20th century. You know, some of them take the mickey, but you know, there are, you know, they just sort of like do all sorts of mad modern things in out of context. But if you look at a good adaptation of one of the old sort of classics, it gives you the book in a kind of a condensed form. They're never perfect, but they give you a feeling and the look of the 19th century, which I think does help to put you in the mood of it, the mind of it.
Yes.
You know, as well. And a lot of those are free on YouTube and so on as well.
Yeah.
The BBC used to do loads and loads of Dickens and Austen and things like that, and they're mostly on YouTube. You know, you see if you want any of them. Some of them are good. I know my son was doing his son and daughter were doing their literature A level. We sat and watched BBC adaptations of all the books. You know.
Yeah.
It is kind of cheating, but they had to read the book as well, you know. But it helped bring the book to life a little bit for them.
Yeah.
Is the Ex Libraries website need to register and rather than like open source website?
I don't know exactly. Sorry.
I know about it because yeah, I looked at it. You should have the library card to log in.
Oh no,
because
not with Ex
Libris. I
think there you're talking about the borrow box one. Lucy, were you talking about Ex Libris? No, I think you just have to become a member. It's no payment. It's just
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I already signed up the library. I know BookBox, no worry. I'm already using the service, but just that usually the audiobooks like Harry Potter, it's quite long still, like 25 hours, 14 hours of audiobooks, still long. But then Ex Library, you mean the short story upstairs?
Yes, yes.
So short story would be nice.
You can just get individual short stories or collections of short stories.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I know, because I think Middlemarch by by George Eliot is 48 hours long on audio. 48 hours.
Oh no!
Long.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
No, too long.
Anyway, I'm going to have to call it a day. You can all be chattering away on WhatsApp. Look out for my emails, and I'll see you next week.
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
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 Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.